to some people. And I am very different than Bree because this is a very important day to me. For the past couple of weeks I've been saying to Chemo, but I'm older, I'm an older grad student. And he said, you can drop the off that. So I prepared remarks, and they're not short. So because I'm old, and oh my goodness, and I just want to, I'm thrilled to take a moment to share a little bit about my personal journey here at Sac State. So I first walked onto this campus about 6 years ago, almost to the day. And my week had been going pretty badly. I was crying every evening. I was the advertising director at a local alternative weekly newspaper, but I was really, really unhappy. I was unhappy even though I had this fancy job, and I was confused because I was only one step away from publisher, which was my dream job at the time. And so I didn't really understand why I was so unhappy. I think I was miserable because I thought it was the furthest that I would ever go professionally, and it probably was, because I had never finished my bachelor's degree. I had an associate's degree from New York State, but I never did finish my BA, and it was my greatest source of shame. And it was something that I really thought was going to hold me back and hold me down. So one evening, as I was in the living room wiping my tears again, my husband said to me, why don't you go back to school? And this was not by far the first time that he ever said this to me. But for some reason, this time I said, okay. And come in. There's my friends. Let's make them feel really uncomfortable. There they are! So I had said, okay, yes, I will go back to school, and I couldn't believe that it was actually going to happen. But within a few days, Michael drove me over to campus over our lunch break, and I met with a counselor, Shan was her name. She looked over my transcripts, and we figured out what I was going to do and what I needed to do to transfer as a junior at Sac State, and our plan was launched. I was a business major. And in a few months, I went to the business school's orientation and found myself thinking, oh no, I have to take statistics, which is funny now that I'm on T-Show. And it's going to take how long? And this just doesn't seem like the right fit for me. And one of the professors said, well, why don't you think about communication studies? So on Monday, the following Monday, I went back to campus, and I made my way up to the 5th floor of Mendocino Hall, and I walked into the office, and I think it was Carly, told me to just go ahead and ask any professor that was here and had office hours at the time, and he won't remember it, but I just strolled into Dr. Buss's office. And I had a nice conversation with him, and he said, I really think communication studies would be a good fit for you. Why don't you talk to a couple of the other professors? And so I did. I just found myself in the fall. I took all communication studies classes. And then a week later, my father was diagnosed with lung cancer. He declined very rapidly, and it was really confusing because I had just left my career, and I went back to college, and now my father was dying. So I was feeling lost and sad, and one evening at the end of Comms 8, Dr. Gale said, Sarah, why don't you stay after class for a minute? And she said, I noticed you, and you seem like a really good student, and I'm just wondering, is everything okay? And so I told her about my dad, and I didn't realize how much I had to talk about it. I didn't realize how much I needed to talk about it. And after I left that class, I was like, okay, maybe I'll be okay. And 8 weeks later, my dad died. And it was right before midterms. And I thought, what am I going to do now? And all the professors said, well, you don't have to take the test. We can figure something out. And I thought, well, why don't I just try? I studied. I've done all the homework. I think I can make it. And I got all A's. And I thought, oh, maybe I'll do very well here. A few years later, as I was getting ready to graduate, I was once again confused about what to do. I was applying for more jobs that I didn't want, and I was feeling like, was this even really worth it? And Michael said to me, why don't you just apply to grad school? And then a funny thing happened. Jerry Smith said to me, why don't you apply to grad school? You see, there were people that I cared about, and who cared about me, who asked me to think about doing something special. There were people I didn't even know, who didn't know me, who asked me to think about what I could do, and what I should do, and what I wanted to do. And then I started grad school, and I realized very quickly that I'd entered a whole new ballgame. But at least I learned to recognize when someone was asking me an important question. There was the moment when Jerry asked me if I would consider entering the university research competition. And I did, and I entered it, and then I had the opportunity to represent our university at the state level, which is pretty awesome. There was a moment when Dr. Stoner asked me to examine Khan Academy, which these guys probably are all sick of hearing about. And I ended up with 2 conference papers. And more importantly, I really ended up with a new approach to scholarship and research and education in general. There was the moment when Chemo asked me to stay after class with Cassie and asked if maybe we wanted to do a little research paper together, and it ended up getting published. There was the moment when Chemo suggested that I ask Carmen to join my committee when Dr. Gale went on sabbatical. There was the moment when Chemo asked me, what do you mean? When he received the first draft of chapter 1 of my thesis. These moments, these questions changed everything. And that's what I've learned. It's not the fancy job, it's not the degree, it's the questions that change everything. More importantly, it's the people who noticed me. It's me noticing me that changed everything. So what I would like to say is this. To our families, and our friends, and our teachers, thank you for noticing us. Thank you for challenging us. Personally, in addition to my professors and my committee, I want to thank Chemo for challenging me like no one in my whole life ever has. You truly are the giver of light and all that is good. Michael, thank you for noticing me. Thank you for asking me to think about what I wanted to do, what I needed to do, and then supporting me through the whole journey. Because just because I stopped crying about that stupid job doesn't mean I stopped crying all the time. But you always listen to me, and you always ask me to think and to be true to myself. Classmates, Team Who, it's our turn to notice ourselves. It's our turn to notice our friends, our families, our students. It's our turn to ask, why don't you think about it this way?